Are you ready for corporate tax coming in the UAE? Exactly 1 year from this month. Yes, exactly July 2023. Corporate tax will be introduced in the UAE. And there's a lot of questions. How do I comply? What is this about? That is why today I have a very, very important guest who will talk about corporate taxation. And I am very much excited because this person is one of my first managers in taxation, and he's one of my favorites. Let me give a quick background story about Terry. Terry is one of my bosses in Intel, and I think his gift is being calm. In the Philippines, you always have these big tax problems because of the huge tax assessments that we receive from the government and many, many other things. And whenever Terry comes to the Philippines and visit us, those big problems that we have, after talking to him, we just feel calm because there's always a solution. So let me bring my guest today on stage. He is actually, let me tell his full name. He's Terry Yuen. Terry has over 30 plus years experience in taxation. He's very blessed to have the opportunity to work with big companies like Intel, Dell, and BP. And now let me bring Terry on stage. Terry, thank you. I cannot thank you enough. After 22 years, we met online, and thank you for saying yes to this interview.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the kind words as well.
Mm.
Mm.
When I talk about taxation, the first thing that came to my mind is actually you.
Mhm.
Because when we're talking about international taxation, I think you're an expert of over 30 years. Maybe Terry, you can tell us of this 30 plus years experience, at what countries have you seen in terms of the tax implementations? Which countries have you managed?
Okay, good, good. First of all, I'm not an expert. I'm just like you, one of the people practicing tax in the region. I was lucky to be in the region at the early stage when the region was just opening up for international businesses. So I do have some experience in dealing with international tax. So I used to manage probably over 30 countries in the region.
Wow,
So
30.
basically the whole of Asia,
Uh-huh.
China, uh, Japan, Korea, all the way down to Southeast Asia, the ASEAN countries, and then Australia, New Zealand, and India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. And the last 10 years, my region actually expand to countries like Fiji, which I have
Oh,
never been to yet, and also the east coast of Africa and the Middle
wow.
East.
That's really huge, Terry. So
Yes.
now, can you tell me a quick story? Which one can you never forget in terms of taxation, and why? Of these many countries, 30 countries you
Oh,
said.
I think each country is very unique in terms of their tax law and tax practices. Some are probably closer to the old British system. Some have
Oh,
their own ways. Some are
mm-hmm,
closer to the US systems. So I
mm-hmm,
think they all very unique. But what I cannot forget, or my unforgettable experience, is dealing with the
uh-huh,
tax authorities. Some of them are quite aggressive in terms of the way they try to assess tax.
mm-hmm.
I'm not going to name the country, but there are countries
Yes,
that
uh-huh.
they always feel that people are not paying enough tax in their
Oh,
countries. So they would come and do audit for a long time, sometimes like a whole month. And then
mm-hmm,
when they find something that they don't like, then they'll automatically assume the company is not doing something right. Okay.
mm-hmm.
Then the burden of proof is on the company to
True, yeah.
satisfy them that, hey, we're
Mm,
doing it right, we're paying the fair share of tax. So that process can be quite long and painful in terms of convincing the auditors. And then in order to keep an upper hand, they will slap you with a 100%, sometimes even 300% penalty,
oh,
just to
no.
scare your management that you may want to, settle the case instead of
Mm,
going to court, because they said, if you're going to take this to court to fight with me, the penalty is going to be 300%. But if you
mm,
settle now, agree with me,
uh-huh.
then I waive the penalty, just pay the tax. But sometimes the tax is overestimated.
Yes, mostly right. Actually, I handle tax assessments also, and I think you're very right, Terry. the problem with taxation is the burden of the taxpayer to prove to the tax auditor, which is the government authority, to say the tax that I'm paying is right and whatever assessment they found out is wrong. And I think it's a very painful and tedious exercise to explain to tax authorities, that you're doing your business right. And which actually leads me to the next question. Of these many countries that you manage, what do you think are the most common penalties that tax authorities are imposing in
Okay.
terms of penalty? Yeah.
I would say probably there are three areas, right? The
Now,
first area is on the documentation.
oh,
So I think some country believe that they have documentation, but I would urge them to check that their people are actually keeping or maintaining or preparing the right documentation. For
mm,
example, if you talk about custom duty or
mm,
VAT, you got to have the invoices, the
of
import documents, right?
mm,
The question I often struggle in my mind is, in some cases, countries would tell you they accept soft copies.
mm,
They'll say e-copy is fine. But
yeah.
then when they really gone into a difficult position with you, then they'll
Of
say, we only want hard copies.
oh,
If you cannot produce the hard copies, then we don't
yeah.
know this is original. They won't
Hmm.
accept the e-copies. So I feel that the law's never clear on that whether soft copies are as good as hard copies when it comes into the courtroom.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because
Mm,
I don't believe the courtroom would accept just an image of a document without actually somebody vouching the original. So this is
exactly.
always a dilemma that you got to
Mm,
maintain your documentation. If you want to be safe, you probably
uh-huh.
should keep hard copies. But then it's going to
Agree.
take some space. People need to
Mm,
take care of
storage.
the
Mm,
filing and all that, right?
yes.
It's a bit uh, more hard work than just keeping soft copies because it's
Mm,
just in a file and you can search easily.
yeah.
So I would say the first is documentation.
Mm-hmm,
The
mm-hmm.
second challenge is probably on your transfer pricing because now the world's getting
Oh,
very globalized. A lot of digital transactions happening.
hmm.
So there are multiple parties involved, even within your own company, because you may
Mm,
sell from Dubai to a website somewhere in Singapore or in the UK or US, then to a customer somewhere else, right?
yes.
So there's multiple parties involved. The question is, are you allocating the profits, the margin, in a
Uh-huh.
way that the tax for authority will be agreeing with you in the future?
True.
And that's basically transfer pricing is like there's a pie. Are you
Mm-hmm.
giving everybody what they think is a fair share of the pie? So
Hmm.
you will see most international companies are struggling with transfer pricing issues. They have their
Ex-
own transfer pricing position, but they're
yes.
often challenged by
The government, right? Hmm.
different tax authority saying, I don't like it. The third area I would say is indirect tax,
Huh. Hmm.
because that's not just like once a year you file your tax return. This is
Hmm.
happening every day. And
Yes.
whether your program, your apps are capturing the transaction in the right way and
Uh-huh.
imposing the right VAT with the right documentation. So indirect tax is probably a very tedious process
Hmm.
with a lot of work, a lot of compliance happening on a day-to-day basis. And that's where I think a lot of companies are trying to automate.
Mm-hmm.
So when you
Mm-hmm.
automate, I think you just need to automate it in the right way and maintain and update constantly. Otherwise, I think the problem is with automation, right? When things working well, fantastic. You save a
Yeah.
lot of time and money. But when
Yeah.
it goes wrong, you're
Hmm.
making errors in a very
Hmm.
quick and fast, basically big way.
Hmm.
All the transactions are captured wrongly
Hmm.
and it affects all the transactions because it's automation.
I agree with you. I think those are three good points, right? I definitely agree with you on documentation. I think every company have their own way of documenting things, and the government authority always have their own rules of what is sufficient documentation to support the evidence of your transactions. And transfer pricing now, with globalization, with international sales happening all over the world, it's also a question of how much is taxable, what is taxable, and at what percent, and what's exempt. So that's very good. And lastly, you mentioned about indirect tax. I think automation, as you said, is very good. I've seen it in many companies, and I think the biggest gap is what you said. When you cut that process of doing it manually and you automate it, that's very good. But when you miss something, I've seen huge penalties from that, because even the company are caught unaware that because of that automation there were failure in between that they themselves don't know, because there are no subsequent controls or checks to make sure. So I think, to summarize that, the most common mistakes, and actually the things that companies should focus on, is documentation, transfer pricing, and indirect tax. Now, Terry, maybe this is the last question, because I know taxation is something some people already get a headache with taxation, but I love how you explained it in very simple terms. Now that corporate tax is coming in the UAE, what is your best advice to companies so they can get their taxes right? Because here in the UAE specifically, if for tax evasion, they can have at least 500% of the penalty. Plus, also the period of limitation, it doesn't expire.
Yep.
The law is very clear to say if you actually did not pay the tax, they can go up to the heirs. When you're dead already, they can go to the heirs and confiscate, whatever is left, just to get the money if you fail to pay the taxes. So, what's your best advice for companies?
Oh, I can summarize that in three things, right? First, it's people. First is
Uh-huh.
people. Second
Mm-hmm.
is data.
Oh,
Data. And then the
uh-huh.
third is collaboration between tax people and the business people. So let
Hmm.
me explain that a little bit. People is
Mm-hmm.
you got to have people that understand the law, can put
Yes.
together a structure, a process to basically comply with the tax law, file the tax returns, and maybe automate some of the process. That's need to be driven by people. So I would
Hmm.
say company need to have the right people to manage that process, just like in finance, in business. First thing
Hmm.
first is you got to have the right people to do that for you. How big of
Hmm.
the team you can decide, but you
Yes.
got to have a core team with people with the knowledge, right?
Hmm.
Then the second part is you probably don't want to do things manually in this
Of course.
era of time. So you will probably want to automate. But the
Hmm.
first thing before you automate, you got to make sure you capturing the data correctly. For example, all these transactions are
Hmm.
happening in Dubai. These are domestic transactions. These are international transactions. So you're capturing the data correctly, classify them right way. With wrong
Hmm.
data, you're gonna have wrong
Yes.
outcome. Garbage in, garbage out. So
Hmm.
so I would say first invest in people, so that's somebody leading the process,
Mm-hmm.
and then making sure your data is clean. Then you can start hopefully automating, put in place some processes, right?
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
third thing is I think there's where a lot of misunderstanding and mistakes happening in the past is people think that the tax people are just backroom people.
Oh, yes.
So when they design the business, they're
Ah.
saying, let's do it this way. And then let
Mm.
the tax people manage that after the fact. I would
Hmm.
say integrate the tax people early into the process so that when you
Exactly.
build a business model, the tax, just like legal and other things, are already built into the business way of doing things.
Hmm.
Some people will think, oh, tax is just a cost, right? They
Yeah.
forgot in other countries, tax can be a big advantage to a lot of multinational companies
Of
because they
course.
were able to use tax planning to lower their tax rates legally,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So when you look, I think in your country it's good that the tax rate is only 9% for now,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Going for
Yes.
next year. But when the tax rate is much higher, and if
Hmm.
you're able to save tax on that, so for example, in the US, tax rate can be more than 30%. In some of the
Huh.
country in Asia, 25% to
Hmm.
30%. If you can reduce a certain percentage of that taxable
Hmm.
income, right?
Hmm.
The 5% of something is very, very significant. It's almost like part of your profit margin.
Yes. Yes.
So I feel that a lot of companies are under investing in their tax resources, thinking Tax is
mm,
just a backroom compliance team.
mm,
Instead of thinking them as part of the business. And if you do
mm,
it rightly, you avoid
mm.
double taxation. You have a
Yes.
chance to lower your effective tax rate.
Mm,
And basically, with the return that you can get on your tax savings, that would make the company more competitive
of
because you got
course.
more money. You
Mm,
got 5% more than your competitor. That
mm.
5% you can reinvest, or you can use it to motivate your people to work better, right?
Even better, right?
Yeah.
So let me summarize that those are actually very good tips. I definitely agree with you on all of that. So to get your taxes right, Terry said, invest in your people. You need to have the right people who understand the taxes because, of course, to get everything right, you need to have the right staffing, the right number of resources, the right people who really understands who will support you, the right data. As Terry said, automation is not enough. You need to make sure that you have the correct information that will, of course, support your business transactions and specifically your taxes. And the last but not the least, which I think is the most important, is the business. Need to collaborate finance and every area of the business. It needs to be considered from the beginning. And I think what alarmed me, I was reading through Uber Careem. They have $100 million tax bill in Saudi Arabia. And
Mm.
the problem there was that they were actually incorrectly calculating the taxation part in terms of the VAT basis. And I think it's important for every company, startup, unicorn, whatever company, you understand what's the impact of taxation in your business. Because when you get it right from the beginning, it's like planting a seed right there. You
Yeah.
cannot grow that plant if you don't actually take care and nourish it from beginning. So it's really, it taxes, as you said, it's not just a backroom function. It's a key function of the business that can help you first save yourself from fines and penalties, save yourself from cost savings in terms of this lower income tax and double taxation agreements. And I think these are very, very important things. So thank you very, very much,
You're
Terry,
welcome.
for your time. Is there any, if people want to connect with you, I know you're already enjoying your life to the fullest now.
Mhm.
Is there any way, any projects or anything, for people who want to reach you?
I'm on LinkedIn, uh,
Uh-huh.
or people can ask you questions, and maybe you can redirect to me. I'm
Oh,
happy
yes,
to
I
share
can do.
some of my experience and knowledge in the future.
Exactly. I
Mhm.
think, in terms of taxation, we can sense how much Terry is, like really a Buddha. I actually told you, you're like a Buddha of taxation, Terry. At this, at this level, I think you know everything by now. And
Not everything, but I'm happy to share some of my good experience and also bad experience.
Yes. And
Mhm.
I think what I admire the most about it there, you have that, as you said, right, you need to have a calm mind to solve problems. Because in taxation, it's very easy to get excited, right? To fight the authorities, what's right, what's not right. But I think at the end of the day, as you said, you need to have a calm mind to solve the problem and then there's a solution, correct?
Oh, I think when you have good people around you, it's
Ah.
easier to do that. So I,
Mm,
I would I would urge company when you're dealing with a new issue like corporate tax compliance, right?
mm,
Get the right people to help you, whether
that's
it's outsource people or your in-house people. But I would probably say it should be a mixture of both. You got your in-house people doing that day by day, and then
mm-hmm.
from time to time they talk to the external advisor, getting
Yes.
some best practices, getting some new ideas. So
Hmm.
I would say try not to under invest in your
Yes.
people. And then
Hmm.
if you want to be efficient, then you got to look at using the right data to automate, right? And the
Hmm.
most important thing at the end is you got to have the business people working hand in hand with the tax people so that you build everything from the beginning instead of tax just constantly running after the business trying to understand like what are you guys doing? What are the transactions?
Hmm.
Then you would have a higher chance of missing something because the tax people are just constantly trying to catch up with business.
Hmm. That's
And,
very
and, the,
good.
and you're just dealing with that in a reactive way.
Yes. Hmm.
Right?
I agree with you. It
Instead
has
of
to be.
saying, we come to
Hmm.
the drawing board, design the business model together. And when
Uh-huh.
the business model is being formed, is both business innovative at
Mm.
the same time is tax efficient.
Oh, that's very good. That's a very good question. When you build a business, is it innovative and is it actually tax efficient? And of course, invest in your people. Again, thank you very much, Terry, for your time. Let me introduce myself. My name is Juan Valentan Kalupig. My goal of creating and interviewing, these tax experts is to help people get their taxes right. Connect with Terry on LinkedIn. His name is Terrence Yuen. Connect with me on LinkedIn. My name is Juan Valentan Kalupig. I'm the first Filipina LinkedIn live broadcaster. Also, the 2021 most influential Filipina on LinkedIn. And see you on the next episode where I'm going to talk more how to get your taxes right. Thanks again, Terry. Bye.
Bye.